Welcome to the Revolution of Purpose podcast. I'm your host, John Street, and each week we bring you conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and individuals who have aligned their life with purpose and created extraordinary results.
So I'm going to live through it and accept it radically with grace and hope and love.
I would be proud to be in this council.
It was an honor. I had so much fun.
Tune in every Monday for the Revolution of Purpose solo show and every Thursday for Revolution of Purpose conversations. Welcome back to the Revolution of Purpose podcast. I am your host, John Street, and each week we bring you conversations with thought leaders, change makers, and individuals who have aligned their lives with purpose, and they're making a meaningful difference in the world. That right there explains Kathy Baldock to a T. Like if I were trying to describe Kathy Baldock, I would say she is someone who is a thought leader, who is a change maker. She is someone who's living her purpose. Kathy is an author, a speaker, an educator, and founder of Canyon Walker Connections. For more than 2 decades, she has worked to build bridges between LGBTQ people and the Christian community through education, historical research, and compassionate dialogue. She is one of the leading voices helping people understand how theology, culture, politics, and history have shaped the church's relationship with LGBTQ people. Kathy is also one of the primary researchers featured in the documentary 1946, The Mistranslation That Shifted Culture. Her newest book, Forging a Sacred Weapon, explores the fascinating story of how the word homosexual first appeared in the Bible translation in 1946 and the far-reaching impact that decision had on faith communities and culture. What I appreciate most about Kathy's work is that it isn't driven by ideology, it's driven by a desire for truth, understanding, and reconciliation. And that's what makes this conversation so important. Because today we're talking about much more than just Bible translations. We're talking about purpose. We're talking about courage. We're talking about what happens when one person is willing to follow truth wherever it leads. Kathy, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Revolution of Purpose podcast.
We've known each other, we're trying to figure it out, maybe 15 years.
Since 2010. So 2010, years. We first chatted in, maybe even actually the end of 2009 on GCN forums. That stands for Gay Christian Network, which is now the Q Christian Fellowship, I do believe. Is that right? Or Q Fellowship?
Q Christian Fellowship.
Yes, Q Christian Fellowship. Yes, at the time it was GCN. And yeah, Kathy was instrumental for me. Like I kind of want to begin with a personal story of just thanking you because I grew up as a gay kid in conservative Birmingham, Alabama, in the Bible Belt, in evangelical Pentecostal church. And for many years, I didn't even know that there was a place for my faith and sexuality. And I know finding GCN at the time was like a breath of fresh air. And then actually speaking to Kathy and some of the things that she was so active in the forums, the online forums at the time and helping people. And I remember talking to you, Kathy, if you may remember this, before the Nashville conference in 2010, I was so nervous about going. My mom, who was a former Pentecostal evangelist, was telling me I shouldn't go, even though I was like, however old I was then, 33 years old. But she was just adamant, you cannot do this. This is heresy and blah, blah, blah. And I remember you took the time in those forums to talk with me and really encourage me and kind of allay some of the fears that I had. And so what's interesting is, so I because of our conversation, I attended that Nashville conference, and then that led me to the Denver conference the following year, which is where I met my husband, Joe. So in a very real way, like my life changed so much because of you and how God used you in my life. And I can't tell you how many other people you have touched over the years, I'm sure. So it's so good to talk to you, Kathy.
And
you're so
welcome. Conferences, if people resist them, if you're looking, they say, how do you meet potential spouses? You go where people gather around the things you're interested in, right?
Yeah.
And, 2 of my absolute closest friends, Dean Johnson and Richard Archambault, they met at the GCN conference when the last day is kind of wind down and everybody goes out to dinner. They met and they sat at a same table, I think in a Denny's, and they started talking about their mutual love of travel. And they've been married almost 11 years now.
That's
I mean,
amazing.
go where the thing you like to do, those people are. And you went
Hmm.
and you had the courage to go because it's a bit easier now, but at the time, yeah, it was a
Oh, it
difficult
was
choice.
so bad. Yeah. Well, and I don't know that I may have shared this with you at the time, but it probably, it's been years since we've talked about it. But what happened with that with my mom too was, I had this conversation with her. I decided I was going to go. She was, literally just so against it. And then the morning before I left, she called me and asked me to come by, and I went. And my mom, who was Pentecostal, evangelical through and through. When I get there, she has tears in her eyes and she said, I can't explain it, but God has told me you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do and that you are supposed to go to this conference and that you didn't choose this. And it's not for me to understand and to just know that He created the way you are and He loves you. And I mean, that God did over one evening what arguments could not have done over months for my mom. And so I went to the conference. When I came back, she was so excited about hearing about it. She used to have a prayer meeting. She was like, invite your gay friends to the prayer meeting. Like all of a sudden, she became affirming overnight. And
No.
it was a miracle of God. And here's what's wild about that. That was in January of 2010. She was diagnosed with cancer in June of 2010 and passed in July of 2010. But we had that last 6 months of me being completely out,
Wow.
her affirming everything. And I'm so thankful for that. I really am.
Wow.
And it
And
just goes to show you that God can do anything like that.
so my story of going to the first GCN was in 2007. I had read an article in the New York Times. I mean, I'm a New Yorker, so since I've been
Mhm.
15, I've subscribed and read the New York Times to this day, even though the rate is now $33 a month, but still, I subscribe to the New York Times.
I work
And
the crossword every day
I
myself.
do all the word puzzles.
I love them.
I love connections. I love Wordle. I love them all.
Hmm.
Spanogram, all of it. And I do them every day.
I do too.
And I mean, you must know someone that loves words is going to play the New York Times words puzzle. So I was in a relationship and had been in one for almost 6 years with someone I was divorced. I started the divorce process in 2001. It took quite a few years to get divorced because my husband kept wanting more and more and more, or actually I call him my husband. And so I was in a relationship with someone I thought I wanted to marry. Very high profile in the drug enforcement community, the highest profile DEA agent that had ever worked in it. And so I was kind of in this sweet spot of, senators would call him, and had a good reputation, but he didn't like gay people. And so this change started happening in me, which I'm sure we'll get into, but I wanted him to give me a ride to the airport because the first one I went to was in Seattle. And he was so resistant that I thought, why do I want this person that's just like going to rain on my parade to even take me to the airport? So I said, you know what? Don't even take me to the airport. And I had a friend take me and I had a friend pick me up because he was so like, you shouldn't go, you shouldn't go, you shouldn't do this. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And I knew I had to go. So I wouldn't even let him take me to the airport. And 2 weeks after I went to that conference, that relationship ended because I knew I had a choice. But that's all what this discussion is about. Like, what choice
Hmm.
did I make? So anyway, we'll get into that. But I was I had pushed back on going to a GCN conference too as a straight person.
I love that. Well, and I love that you were, whether you use these terms or not at the time, but you were protecting your energy. Like
Oh
you
yeah.
knew that's not the energy you wanted to start this conference
Nope.
with.
Nope.
And I think
Nope.
that's really awesome because I do a lot of teaching about energy and energy work and how important it is to flow in alignment. And if something doesn't fit, there's no need to entertain it. You
Nope.
know, you knew down deep he doesn't need to be taken to the airport. So you're like, no thanks. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I remember you telling that story in Nashville, actually, or Denver, but and talking about when you came back and broke up with him because you had to make that choice. And I think that plays into what we're talking about today in a very important way because you chose authenticity, you chose your purpose, you chose your
I did.
calling over what seemed like a very stable or I guess like I mean as successful as he was, like that would have been the safe choice to just stay with him and keep your mouth shut. But you
And
said no.
even financially, right? Because at the
Hmm.
time I was a single woman, um, and he had far more than I did, not just reputation and wealth. He had even bought a parcel of land. People that know me know I hike, and he bought a parcel of land between those two canyons where I hiked all the time with the intention that, oh, this is where we'll live. I mean, all of that was just laid out on a plate before me. And I said, no, that's crazy. I said, no.
Mm.
Wow.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, I'm so thankful that you did because it has
I am
changed
too.
my life and so many lives. Well, and I know your life changed a lot too. I want to ask you though one question. I ask every guest this question, and I think it's a beautiful question to really stop and ponder. But who is Kathy Baldock today that the younger Kathy would be proud of?
I think I've always expressed myself. Even my mother used to tell me, even as a kid, I mean, she would just say, you're a pain in the ass. And the reason I was a pain is because I was a question asker. And my mom, that a lot of people affectionately know as Buttercup, my mom was not well educated. My mom went to Catholic school in New York. We're New Yorkers. I'm a fourth generation Manhattanite. And so she went to Catholic school, as did I. And then she went to a school that no longer exists, Mother Cabrini High School, in Inwood, in New York. And then after that, she went to do some secretarial school. And I say it in the acknowledgments in my book. My mom only read two books in her life, and the only two books. I mean, and I'm just like always in a book. I mean, I have to juggle them like, what do I want to read next? My mom read Dr. Zhivago in 1957, which is a really fat book, and my first book. Those are the only two books she ever read. And so my mom was not curious at all. And so that was kind of, she tried to tamp that down in me as a child. And because it was problematic to her, because I would ask a lot of questions that she couldn't answer. And then sometimes the questions to her she felt were embarrassing. A couple of months ago, these three memories just flooded back, but one was as simple as I couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, and we were picking up something at the dry cleaners. And nobody, we don't use dry cleaners the way we used to use dry cleaners, but there was that smell to dry cleaners, right? So whatever that ethylene or that something smell was,
Yeah.
I found it curious. So we go in to pick up dry cleaning, and that machine is going around and around and around, right, to pick your clothes off that rotating rack, circular rack. And I said to the person, "What's that smell? And like, why, when I come in here, do I smell that stuff? And what do you use it for?" And my mother like banged on my arm and said, "Stop asking questions. Stop asking questions." And then, and that was very often as a child, very often. And I always knew I was curious, but it was kind of presented to me as an embarrassment. Like, don't embarrass people by asking questions. And then when I got into college, I had a lot more freedom. I went to an engineering school and I had a lot more freedom. Intellectually, I did. But I still had this thing in me was like, don't embarrass people, don't ask questions, don't speak up. Don't speak up. Don't bring attention to yourself. Don't speak up. Don't ask questions. And then I married a man who was pretty similar to that, right? Not similar to me, but stop asking questions. Like, why are you always asking questions? And one, I mean, I didn't plan on saying any of this, so yay for you. Our last trip together, we were in Spain, and we were in this town that was an olive growing region. And we were in a parador. I think that's what they're called. They take these old historic sites and they turn them into hotels so that they have this dual purpose of keeping up these historic sites. It was an old castle and making money on them, yada, yada. And I was standing on the balcony of this old castle and it overlooked an olive grove. And I was standing and leaning out as far as I could because I was trying to see where this trail that I could see through the olive grove was going. And I came out and he said, "What are you doing?" This was our last trip together. And I said, "I'm just trying to see where that path is going because I want to know if I should go walking on that path, where will it bring me?" So he said, "Why can't you ever be happy with what's right in front of you? Why are you always looking over the next hill for the next thing? Why are you always looking somewhere else? Why can't you just be happy?" And it was a repeat, like, right? It was a repeat of what I had been told since I was a child. And I am so darn glad that I broke away from those voices that tried to hold me from walking in a room and bringing attention to myself. Like, I want to now, as a speaker, walk into a room and say to have even my clothing, the way I dress, the way I present myself, people to look at me and say, she knows what she's talking about because I know what I'm talking about on this issue. And I want that attention, not because I want the attention, but I want people to listen to me. And I am so glad that I am a person that found my voice. And I think I would have been surprised as a child that my voice and my curiosity were good things because I was told they were not good things. So that's it's an answer that I never expected to be giving you, but yay for you, John.
Well, yay for you. I think it's, using your voice is changing the lives of thousands of people. And so, I know you just said, as a child, you never really thought about what that would look like. What was the moment that made you say, I'm done letting people tell me to stop ask questions? Like, was there a specific straw that broke the camel's back?
I think just over time, I realized that I have some unique gifts that I didn't appreciate, that I didn't even see in myself. I have two children. I have Andrew, who's 40, and I have Sam, who's 39. Sam's a girl. Sam's Samantha. And one
And
lives,
hundreds more from GCN that probably
yeah.
you could adopt.
And so Andrew lives about an hour and a half away I live near Tahoe. He lives up the lake and outside the lake. And then Sam lives in Brooklyn. So she's become the fifth generation New Yorker. So, and I would watch Andrew as a little boy and I homeschooled them because, of course, I'm that conservative mom. And so I homeschooled them and I would teach lots of topics. And I would watch Andrew. Sammy is an excellent student. Sammy graduated #1 out of the high school, #1 out of the business school. Sammy's just a go-getter. You hand her a task, she's the person that accomplishes it. Absolutely. Andrew didn't get the same grades as Sammy, but Andrew is really wicked smart. And the way Andrew would put it, like I would teach him maybe some history and some cultural things and some religion, and I would teach him, and he wouldn't say much. And then Andrew would spit back this kind of original statement that took all of these things and put them together and gave me something back. And I would look at that kid as he was growing up and think, how the heck does that kid do that? Like, how does he do that? And then I realized I did that. I didn't realize I did that until I saw my child do it as a child, as a little boy. And I, so when I started realizing, and I didn't realize that until probably writing the first book. So the first book published in 2014. And as I was writing it, I realized that my asking technique, which I knew I had, and I had a voice for now, but my asking was critical, but I didn't realize I had this gift, and it is a gift, of being able to take all these disparate pieces of information and kind of weave them together to see something. And when I realized I had it, and that not a lot of people had it, that I should use it. I should use it to explain things. And I think in writing the first book, I realized that what I thought I was in this conversation for, why I thought I had been brought into this world, was to do kind of exactly what I did for you, to mother people. I mean, that's what I thought I was here for, was to be an encouraging mother. I remember being at a lot of conferences like the Evangelical Network and other affirming spaces, some of the older affirming spaces, Alliance of Affirming Christians. And I'd be brought into that space, and my job would kind of be at the end when people would say, so people do this now, like Free Mom Hugs does this. A lot of parent groups do it. But at the time, I was the mom in the room. I was the straight mom in the room, and I would kind of be put in that position to hug people and to love people and to tell them they were okay. And my role changed. As soon as I realized this about myself and I started going down the avenue of what I was uniquely gifted to do, that went not by the wayside, but I didn't do that anymore. And the wonderful thing is parents were rising up. Like parents started rising up in these organizations. I think the first time I really saw it, and I can't remember the year, but was when GCN went to Portland. And when I came down this escalator and saw the parents gathering for lunch, and there were hundreds of them, I thought, oh, wow, they're here. And that also made me feel like, oh, they're here. That's their job now. I can go do what I think I'm supposed to do, which was an incredibly odd choice, because I've never taken a writing class. In engineering school at the time, they didn't even require, they do now, I'm pretty sure they do, require humanities. We weren't even required to take any humanities. I took reading classes because I like to read, and I thought if I don't take a class, I'm going to lose that, time set aside to read. So I would travel pretty far on the campus bus to go to the women's campus just to take a reading class. And but so it was very odd that I thought that I had something to say and that I had the ability to communicate it. Was, I'm not going to say arrogant, but it was a big thought to imagine that that was a direction I could go in. But I took it, and it was the right direction. It was the right thing to do, because I still think I'm uniquely gifted to take, because I love to read. I'm very curious, and I love to read. I've read books that, like, people say, where'd you find that? And I said, I don't even know how that crossed my mind. I mean, I've found things in footnotes, and I said, oh, I wonder what that's about. And then it ends up being a really key piece of material. So I moved in a direction I should move, and moved out of a very comfortable spot to do it, but it ended up being right. Wow.
Exactly. Well, and I think that's one of the things that makes your books so amazing, which I haven't read the latest book yet, but with Walking the Bridgeless Canyon, the amount of scholarship that you put into that. I mean, the hours of intense work and like, I mean, even going back old school, like now we're like, oh, everything's at our fingertips, but you actually went to like old libraries and look at, the old, what is that called? Like the Fisher films or something, like
Microfiche, but that's it.
microfiche.
That's this book.
Oh, is that this book too?
That's
Okay.
this book. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's how I found the letters that started the whole book. But if
That's
you think
amazing.
that book is academic, this book, I mean, and it is fat. It's
Oof,
fat.
that's awesome.
It's 100 pages more than the other book, and I've had great editors. I've had unbelievable indexers. I mean, the person that even indexed it, I think you can look at a book and tell how well researched a book is by its index. And
Yeah.
so Carol Fuse Reed indexed it, and she's high level, and Heidi Mann and Wendy Prell Danbury edited, and they just really cared about the topics. So I've had really good people working with me, but this book, I'm proud. I mean, I honestly don't think I could have done a better job on it, but um, this book is more deeply researched, but it's still accessible, which is what I've tried to accomplish because I'm not an academic. I mean, I never in college never took a history class. As I said, never took a writing class. But these are things I've just been curious about, but I've also been really intent on taking difficult topics and trying to make them as accessible as possible. People say that you should write at a 10th grade level. I can't write at a 10th grade level. I I don't know what level I write at, but I'm not writing academic papers. I have friends that are wonderful scholars. And I'll tell you a funny story, and I'll link her to this so she can even see it. Karen Keene, wonderful person. She's married to Sally Gary, who is Centerpiece. So Reformation Project and Centerpiece trade years off, right? They're very
Gotcha.
similar. So 1 year Centerpiece will do the conference, and the next year Matthew will do it with Reformation Project. Sally Gary and Karen Keene were both side B Christians, Christians that knew they were gay, knew they were lesbians, but didn't think that they should ever get into a sexual relationship. Well, they're married. So obviously they figured it out. Well, Karen Keene is wicked smart. Karen Keene is probably any room you walk in, she's probably the smartest person in the room. She is the smartest person in the room. And so 1 year, several of us went down to Dallas to Matthew Vine's wedding. And we were having lunch and we were talking about Sally's progression of books. I think her first book was called like Good God, Good Girl or something like that when she was not affirming. And then the next one she wrote, and she's written 3 books. And they're all great books. And Karen sat there and she said, we were saying, like, why did you write the second book? And she said, well, I wanted to write a book that was far more accessible. And 3 of us sitting together started laughing because we thought, she thinks this is accessible and it's still this incredibly high level because she's brilliant, but her stuff is for people that really know the topic anyway. Like the file system is already set up in their heads and they can just take her information and drop it in someplace in the filing system because they're already there. She's wicked smart, but she's not as accessible as I wanted to be. I wanted a mom of a gay kid to be able to pick this book up without all the file systems set up and be able to understand it. So I'm glad that I'm able to write at that level because all of us are needed in this, right? Karen informs me, I inform other people. There's some people
Absolutely.
that are just great speakers, they're not good writers, right? We all have this place in this thing, and I'm just so lucky because these people are my friends. But I laugh about that because Karen is, I tell you, she's the smartest person in every room.
That's amazing. So,
Yeah.
so for our listeners, the book that she's talking about, her newest book, Forging a Sacred Weapon. So give us like a brief synopsis of what this book does. I mean, I have a good idea, but for those who maybe are watching this and, we have a lot of listeners who, are from all different types of walks of
Yeah.
life, and because we interview people from all different types of walks of life. So if somebody's like, I don't know what this is talking about at all, like maybe just give us from a 10,000-foot view what you accomplished through this book.
So first of all, anyone could find information in this book because the Bible is so influential on discussions of faith, sexuality, and gender. I don't care if you're an atheist. You're going to engage, come up against, have to encounter people of faith that are going to want to hold LGBTQ people back from not only faith communities, but voting rights, parental rights, um, you know, bathroom rights,
Mhm.
everything. The Bible has been used to keep gay people fenced in. So whether you believe it's written or inspired by the Holy Spirit, written by men of God, been properly translated or not, it impacts the lives of LGBTQ people absolutely. So it is a book for anyone. And I use the Bible as a text. The Bible, I put it in historical context, but where it started. So I had been teaching, I do 6 to 8 hour presentations, and they're not boring, but I like to do them.
Yeah, they're
And so
definitely
I
not
do,
boring.
they're not boring, and I do them along a timeline. I put a big timeline up on the wall. And for years I had said, and it's this place, right in this place in 1946, where the first time ever, the New Testament version of the Revised Standard Version of the Bible used the word homosexual for the first time in history. And I've spent time before that building up to what do people think this thing is? Is it a mental illness? Is it a crime? Do you get seduced into it? Do you get molested into it? Does it have to do with body shape? Does it have to do with, the hair on your body? Why are people this way? We don't know. But this is the first time it's used. So what do the people that are on this team, what is their thinking? What do they culturally, theologically, ideologically think about what this word homosexual is? And I would say they knew nothing. They actually, only because I've been in the archives at Yale University, the archives were there because the head of the translation team, Luther Weigel, was the dean of Yale Divinity School, and most of the work took place on the Divinity School campus. Most of the translation work in a room there, and he, and so when he died, all of his papers were preserved at Yale. So, um, so he so what did those people that were doing that work, and I know that work on First Corinthians, people will say the word, what did they think in 1946? No, it's actually what did they think in 1937, because that's when they did the work on First Corinthians. And they signed off on it in 1941, but they didn't do any work beyond 1937. They did it, they signed off in 41. So people will always say they did this work in 1946. That's wrong too, because what people understood about homosexuality from 1937 to 1946 is going to change again, because when the Second World War happens, it's kind of called the national coming out because of the military, because people are finally in, both men and women are in same-sex environments, and they're realizing like, oh, no wonder I didn't like, wasn't in love with Sally Mae from the next farm over, because I really like Dennis. It, because they're now in same-sex environments. So so I believed that those men on the team, the RSV team, they had no theology beyond to support what they did. I believed that their decision was completely cultural and ideological, but I couldn't prove it. I could know all the history around it, and I'm really good about you give me certain periods of history, and I can pretty much peg what was thought about same-sex behavior during any period of history. And so, but it was Ed Oxford. So Ed Oxford, who's the financial advisor in Long Beach, California, he had come to several of my workshops, and he'd gone to seminary at Fuller or Talbot, and he said the second time he came to listen to me, why have I never been taught this? So Ed went the next step and started collecting Bibles to see what word was in the Bible before homosexuals. And he had amassed this beautiful Bible collection. And another time when I was down there, he said, come see my Bible collection. So I went to see his Bible collection, and I was so impressed. And then several months later, he called and he said, I mean, we were then buddies because, he had a good collection of Bibles. And he called me and he said, the head of the translation team, Luther Weigel, who I knew, the translation team was born between, you said a short view. No, I never give short views on anything. The translation team was born between 1870 and 1917. So these were the people, as they were young men in this period of unknowing, did the translation work. Very important to know. So the head of the team, Luther Weigel, when he died in 1976, all of his archives, everything of his, birthday cards, baby cards, everything went into this archive. And so Ed said, his archives are saved at Yale University, and maybe in those archives, there will be records of the meetings of the when they did the translation, and maybe you can find out then what the conversation was. So I expected when we went there for 5 days in 2017, I expected to find what people would kind of be doing today, like somebody sitting off to the side and saying, Dr. Craig is talking about this, and Dr. Moffat says this, and Dr. this, and we had this discussion, we finally settled on, no, none of that was there. None of that detail that I was looking for was there, and I was very disappointed. But on the third day, going through other records, other microfilms, we went through 94 boxes of paper, and then we went through 22 rolls of microfilm. And on the third day, as I was going through the microfilms, I found a series of 4 letters written in 1959 where somebody questioned what directly to the team, why did you use this word, and documented why he thought it was wrong, and unbelievable details, so accurate that it really could have been written today. If somebody wrote that letter today, I would be impressed, and with the thinking skills. And then the more incredible letter is when Dr. Weigel writes back to him and essentially says, I'm only answering this because you put so much time into it. And in his answer, I could see why they did it. And I could see all the fallacies of the limitations and the fallacies of the thinking. And then Dr. Weigel said, you're right, this was not the right word. He admitted to a mistake. And that those letters had never been found. So one of the things I did, I also wrote a biography for David, because here's the guy. He was 21 at the time. He died in 2023. But that is the basis of this book. So I finally found evidence of why they made the decision. So I felt like now that I have evidence, and I'm not just saying, I think it's cultural and ideological, I could see the fallacies of their limited theology. And I wondered, could I write an academic paper? And then people said, if you write an academic paper, it's going to get buried. Write a book. And I thought, oh, there is not enough for a book. So like 564 pages later. So that's the basis of it. Finding those 4 letters became the basis of a book. So I've written from essentially 3200 BC to the impact today, how same-sex relationships have been seen, how procreation's been seen, the role of men and women, same-sex behavior, the Bible texts in context, how these things change and get interpreted through time, and finally to the 1970s when the word homosexual gets embedded in 4 other Bibles, and then off we go to the races and end up in reparative therapy. So it's a very complete book, but it takes each chunk of time so slowly that when you get in that room in 1937 and these guys are trying to figure it out, you understand why they did it. There's no malice attached to it. They were men of their time operating on assumptions of their time, and they made a poorly informed mistake.
Please pardon me while I interrupt your podcast with a word from your sponsor, me. If you're enjoying today's episode and you're looking for more motivation, mindset strategies, and purpose-driven content, then I would love to connect with you. You can follow me on my social media platforms. Instagram is John Street Official, so is YouTube and TikTok. Facebook and LinkedIn is John Street. I also have a business page on Facebook, John Street Mindset Coach. And if you've ever found yourself asking questions like, why am I here? Or am I living my purpose? How do I get unstuck in life? Or how do I take my life to the next level? Then I would love to invite you to schedule a free purpose and clarity call with me. This is an actual call with me, not with someone from my team. During this live complimentary coaching session, we'll talk about where you are and where you want to go, what may be standing in your way. This is my opportunity to serve you and help you gain greater clarity, direction, and momentum. To connect with me, book a call, or learn more about my Revelation of Purpose coaching program, you can visit johnstreet.org. And now, let's get back to this podcast. Well, and I love that you're just stating facts and you're not trying to paint someone as evil and someone as a hero. You're just saying this is why they made this. We're a product of our environment.
Yep.
These were the assumptions they made, and this is why they made them. And now that we, as Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better.
Yep.
Now that we know better, and this is no longer a psychological disorder, we can actually, paint this in the correct context of current time and see what it really means for us today.
Yeah.
I mean, would that be a fair statement, you think?
Yes. And so I'm trying to correct even our side that says, these 12 homophobic men sat down and made this. No, they were not. That was not on their mind at all. They were just they were operating in their assumptions. And in chapter 20, when I do the letters, and I put the letters completely in there, but I analyze each letter, I analyze it with what they knew. Like, here are their language limitations. Here are their psychology limitations. Here are their limitations. And this was kind of the only decision they could have made. But I also believe that when this all ramped up in the 1970s and 80s, somebody, before Ed and I, somebody should have asked the question. It's just a simple question. I wonder why they did that. Let's go look at the translation notes. Somebody should have asked. And I believe on either side, somebody, before they turned the cannons on the LGBTQ community, someone on the Christian loving side should have said, are we right? Like, all of our behavior, all of our actions towards the LGBT community are based on assumptions. What are those assumptions? That's what they did in the scientific revolution, right? They went back to, like, what did Ptolemy say about astronomy and the universe? What did all these other people say about bodies, etc.? They went back and they looked at the assumptions, and that's when the scientific revolution happens, because they look at their assumptions. They say, our assumptions are based on something from 300 BC. I think we've learned something since then. Christians should have done the same thing on either side. We should have looked at our assumptions. And it's crazy that it was us that were the first two to do it.
I'm so thankful that you did. But, it's so interesting. What you did with those letters are what so many Christians never do with the Bible in general.
No.
We're reading somebody else's mail when Paul wrote to Corinth, but can we go back and look at the original language, look at the original context? Like, all of that is so important. What was happening at the time? And I think it's almost a lazy Christianity to just say, well, the Bible says it, so I believe it, and therefore it's true. But they don't. when people say that, so often you don't give any credence to the times that the Bible contradicts itself, and to what the actual language is, and what does it actually say, and why has it been translated, and who was to gain when things were put in or things were left out. And when you wrap the scholarship around it, I believe instead of it being something that challenges your faith, it's something that can actually make it much deeper and more
Right.
beautiful.
Actually, I came out of this because I've had people say, are you still a Christian? I said, oh, better, even more, because now I understand what the Bible says. I understand those texts. I agree with them in context. And something, John, that like I want to point out all the time, and I think I pointed out 3 to 5 times in the book. It's just like beat a dead horse because it's important. The first accessible academic book on Greco-Roman sexual ethics was written in 1978. So anyone doing
Wow.
translation work before that, including the translation team in 1937, had no access to understanding what Greco-Roman sexual ethics looked like, the abusiveness, how people that were enslaved and prostituted and lower status and foreigners and people that were captured had no ability to consent or not consent. And it was not only in the Greek society, they had sexual relationships with citizen boys until they got hairy, and that was not only tolerated, it was expected. It was a mentoring program. You can't even call it pederasty because there was none of this negative stuff attached to it. It was expected. It was what young men did. And then when you get to the Roman times, it changes a little bit who they could have sex with. But we didn't know that. The translation team didn't know that when they did this translation work. So they couldn't see the abusive nature of it. And so when Kenneth Taylor does his work in the Living Bible, published in 1971, and he puts it in 5 more places, he didn't know that either. But anyone doing work after 1980 should have known this. When I was writing one part of the book, I just looked up at my library and I thought, and I've said it, I think I said it as a personal note in the text. I said, I'm looking at my library and I have 4 dozen of these books. 4 dozen of these books that explain Greco-Roman sexual ethics. And anyone doing work before 1980 wouldn't have had one. And the reason was because as that information was being accumulated starting in the 1920s, the censorship laws were so high in the United States and England that anything even squeaking out of Germany, people were fined for selling those books. That information wasn't coming out. And then when the Hitler regime comes in and burns all and destroys all that information, decades of accumulation of sexual differences gets destroyed, it's going to take time to build that up again. So that information doesn't make it around. People say, oh, that's ridiculous. No, it's not getting out of Germany. And some of those authors are writing specifically for doctors and lawyers, and that information doesn't get out. So all these cultural assumptions are being made about who these homosexuals are, including by the RSV translation team. They had no academics on it. So you can understand why they didn't understand that these were abusive, exploitative relationships where the person being penetrated had no ability to drop out, to say, yep, don't want to do that. So these are not homosexual relationships. These are power dynamics.
So what would you say to anyone who watches this who is maybe a member of the LGBTQ community who has frustration or aggravation or resentment because of a mistranslation that led them to be told that they're going to burn in hell or something like that? Or, what do you say to those people? And then I want you to also, I'm going to ask you another similar question to a whole nother audience, but to LGBT people, yeah, what would you say to that?
I have I think my teaching and my writing has spoken to a lot of people because I get lots of mail or lots of comments on social media saying, until I understood this, I actually listened to a podcast this morning while I was hiking. Rocky, who did the movie 1946, the mistranslation that shifted culture, which is the documentary associated with this work. I was listening to two former pastors in Australia um, who have a podcast there now interviewing Rocky. And that one pastor, one of the pastors, he was trying to come out. He said he just couldn't come out. He couldn't come out because he had valued the Bible so highly that he just couldn't do it. He couldn't get over that hurdle. But when he saw the documentary or heard what we were doing, that was his hurdle because he saw that this was a mistranslation, and that broke through all of the other objections. He just needed to know that he was still in alignment with God. And when he said, wait a minute, this is not God doing this, this is people, this is assumptions, that was when he was able to get free. So that's what I see as the benefit to the LGBTQ community is just that freedom of saying, wait a minute, this is not God. This was never said about me. And I hear that. That's what I hear all the time. It's like that click goes like, wait a minute, I've been deceived.
Mhm.
And people come out. And good, good, good. Go to a conference, go hear me speak, and somewhere in the audience, find your next spouse. Not next spouse, your spouse.
Well, but there's so much freedom that comes in forgiveness and realizing that just like you went back to that room in 1937, they weren't necessarily homophobes. They were
No.
people who were doing what they knew to do the best that they knew to do it. And unfortunately, it began a doctrine that just built on
Horrible.
itself and got worse and worse and worse. And so, I think being able to say, I forgive them, I forgive those who preach this, that that gives freedom because it also says they have no power over me.
Right.
And I mean, I grew up in a church that, I believed that God loved everybody but me. Because I mean, we have people who used to be murderers, we have people who are drug addicts, we have people who are rapists. Everybody was welcome unless you were gay. I mean, if you were gay, that was it. That's like the blood of Christ does not cover that. You're an abomination. And so, there's a lot of like, well, how dare they, but we're a product of our environment, and being able to
Mhm.
forgive is going to give us freedom. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison, hoping the other person will die. And
Mhm.
so we have to find the way to forgive and move on. My second question along this, though, is for someone who might be hearing this, who's like, what am I watching? Like, John usually talks about mindset stuff, but this is so important, and especially being Pride Month, but that's not why I have you, but it is perfect timing. Um, but if someone's like, well, what do I do? Because I was always taught that, being gay is a sin and it's a choice and all of that. What do I do with this information now? What would you tell those people who are maybe open to change and they don't know how to change moving forward?
The first thing I would do is you can't say, oh, go collect a few gay friends like I have. But I think a really safe place to start would be just watching the documentary. So
Mhm.
1946 mistranslation. It's called 1946 the movie. You can find it online. You can rent it on Amazon. You can rent it on
Very good. I've
Rocky's
seen it like
site.
3 times.
Right. And pretty soon you're going to be able to own the DVD for it. Um, so that's the first place to start. And if you're intrigued enough by that, and so I would say a couple of things. I think I produce really good material. And so the next thing I would do is I would just go search me online, and I have two 2.5 hour video teachings online that a very gracious church in Austin, when I taught there a few years ago, recorded and put up, which was very kind of them. And then the next thing I would do, and I'll send you all the links later, John, is watch the interview that I did with Reverend David, who wrote the letters, because our friend Tina Wood found him 11 months after we found the letter. She found him. He was a retired United Church of Christ, United Church of Canada minister. He had been a minister, and he was retired and living on Vancouver Island in a little town named Nanaimo. And I knew I wanted his story out there, and I have a very good relationship with Matthew Vines. And we were talking about this just a few days ago, that because I was his first board member and we're friends, I know I can push him a little bit to get what I want. And so at a conference, I told him, I don't know how you're going to do this, but I need to do an interview, a public interview with Reverend David so he can tell his story so that this gets on video, because he was 80, and I knew I could hear in relationship that I could hear him slipping. And I also knew that he was having heart and lung problems. And I said, I don't know how you can do it, Matthew, but it's what I want. It's like, there's not time in the conference. I said, well, cut at dinner time. I don't care what you do. And Matthew listened. And so there's an unbelievable interview. It's an hour and a half it's called An Evening with Reverend David, and it's on the Reformation Project site. I would go there. And then, and that should get someone curious enough to say, oh, there might be something here. And if they're not willing to like dive into a deeper book, I think my first book is good. It's a good overview. But if you're someone that's been asking this question and wants some really good academic facts, my second book, Forging a Sacred Weapon, I think it is going to end up being a classic tool. I believe it's going to end up in seminaries because it's such a good classic overview. But you've got to be willing to sit down and say, okay, teach me, because that book will teach you. And I cannot imagine someone getting to the end of that book and saying, yeah, I don't think she's right. I had the opportunity to talk to a Southern Baptist pastor in Texas from a completely non-affirming church. Someone put me in contact with him a few months ago. We had a lovely conversation, and he came to my site when the book published, and he ordered it. And a couple of weeks ago, I got a text message or an email, I can't remember which it was, saying, I'm 130 pages in, and this is really good, and it's compelling.
That's wonderful.
He said, you did a great job. And
That is wonderful.
you know what? I know I did a great job. And so the other part of what I did was I wrote a discussion guide to go with it. So I wrote the book with parents in mind that want to love Jesus, love God, the Bible, and their child. I wrote this one with David in mind because I wanted to honor him. But I wrote this one with pastors and elder boards in mind because I challenged them. The questions are not light. The questions really make you think, what did you think about this? What are you going to do with this information? Because I want pastor and elder boards to go through 8-week discernment process. And if they decide to become affirming, great. But if they don't, they will at least be informed. And their decisions will not be built on assumptions anymore. It might be built on finances, which it probably will be, but it won't
And
be
they
built
often
on
are.
as
Yeah.
they, and those are the final chapters of my book. Like, who do I expect to change? I don't expect big denominations, mega churches, because it's money. Sorry to say. We don't like to say that as Christians, but churches are businesses. Yeah. But one thing I want to talk to you about in the business aspect of this, because I've got a haircut this afternoon, so I got about 20 minutes. So what I do want to talk to you about is the business part of this, that how I made this decision. It was a business coach. Can I tell you that story?
Yes, please do. Please do. So
I was selling printers and storage technology storage systems after I got divorced. My husband and I owned a business together, and I loved that. We had retail business. We were successful from the start. Mom and pop, card store, Christmas store, very successful. And I did the buying and the merchandising, and we were off the hook successful. And And then when we got divorced, he ended up with the husband ended up with the business, and I was like, what do I do now? So I do what I always do. I make charts like, what should I do? Should I stay in Reno? Should I do this? So I ended up working for this printer company. And I'm going to only mention one of the owners. The owner, well, it was a couple, but Wendy. Wendy McClin, I'm going to name her. Wendy McClintock owned the company. She actually owned it. And so I was a salesperson, and my personality is like I could sell you anything. I mean, you as a business coach know that. Like if you were looking for a salesperson, you would hire me. Hands down, you'd hire me.
Absolutely.
Right? I'm a salesperson. So at a business event, at a networking business event, I won a 2 or 3 hour session with a business coach. And her name is Alice Hyman, and she still does that. And her father was very important in this whole field, Hyman Associates, Heiman, not HY. So HEI. So Alice, I won a coaching session with her, and it was, we were supposed to meet. It was just before Christmas, and we were supposed to meet in like a neutral spot, like maybe a library or a coffee shop, but we had a lot of snow. And she said, because we'd become friendly, just in networking things. And she said, why don't you come to my house and I'll make a pot of tea and we'll just sit down and we'll do this business coaching thing. So I went up to her house. She's not terribly far from me. And I went up to her house and she asked me all the questions like, what drives you? What's your passion? I'm sure it's how you deal with people, right? What's this? What gives you energy? What exhausts you? What do you like? What do you not like? And at the end of this thing, she said to me, I am so confused. I said, yeah. Why are you selling computers? Why are you selling printers? You shouldn't be selling printers. You're not meant to sell printers. You're meant to follow this passion of yours and go make a difference in this. And I remember crying. And not because she touched a spot in me. My crying was like, oh, crap. How am I going to make money? Like, I'm going to leave a successful career of being a salesperson to go follow a non-money passion when, for the next few years, all I'm going to do is hug people. Like, I didn't even know that much. And, how this doesn't make any sense. And so the reason I cried was I was scared to death. Like, I knew she was right, but I was so scared. And so it was just, as I said, it was just before Christmas, and I had taken a break in the day. The bosses knew this. And I went to, and I had to go deliver Christmas baskets to my top customers. And one of those customers was, I think it was an Assemblies church. It was a prophetic Pentecostal church. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, when I go in and this pastor always, he recognizes I'm a Christian, and, he's always saying encouraging things to me, but I know he's got a prophetic voice. And the last thing I want him to do is like to look at me and say anything, nothing. So I walked into his church. He actually answers the door. I want to take this gift basket and put it on his entryway and get the heck out of there, because I don't want some prophet looking at me right now, right?
Uh-huh.
Don't want it. And he said to me, Kathy, come in here and sit in my office for a minute. And I'm like, no, I need to go. And he says, come sit with me. And so I sat in his office. I was like, oh, because my pastor at the time, who eventually said, you don't fit here anymore in a few years, had a prophetic voice, and he was pretty accurate. And so I sat there, and he said, something is troubling you. And I thought, oh, game face. And he said, I don't know what the Spirit is speaking to you, but the Spirit is speaking something to you, and the Spirit is leading you in a direction, and you need to go in that direction, and you need to not be afraid, because God has got you. He's going before you, and you need to listen to the Spirit. And I just was like, and he said, Kathy, what is this about? And I said, yeah, no. I'll take your words under advisement, but I knew I couldn't speak to him about it because it was this small Hispanic Pentecostal church. And there was no way I was going to say, oh, God's telling me to go love gay people. So, so I thought about it for a few days, and then I thought, yeah, I think God is calling me. So I went to my bosses one day and I said to them, and I cried. I mean, I couldn't even, I got in their office and I started crying. And I said, I have to leave this job. Oh, I said, I, I respect you too. I love you too. But I have to leave this job because I think God is calling me to do this other thing. And Wendy came back into my life about 3 or 4 years ago. She lives a couple of neighborhoods away, and I hike with her about 3 or 4 times a month. I put this post up on Facebook a few days ago because I gave her the book and wrote an epistle in there, Wendy's pictures in there. And I said, I need to go do this thing and I need to quit my job. I need to quit my job. And she said, even reminding me a few days ago, she said, Kathy, I knew it. They were Christians. She's a Christian. And she said, I just knew. And she thought, if the Holy Spirit is talking to this woman, I'm not standing in the way. And so she said, yes, we get it. And then she said something more important to me, which mattered to me, because I knew that I was coming up. I had crossed toes, and everybody knows I'm a hiker. And those crossed toes would not have served me well hiking until I'm 90. And I needed surgery. And she said, we are going to keep you on the payroll for 3 months and keep your health insurance for 3 months. You go get the surgery you need and then go on to what God's calling you to do. And Wendy did that for me.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Isn't it amazing? So, and I'm not saying this was easy. There were challenges. There were certainly financial challenges. I mean, what I had for dinner that week was what Rayleigh's put on the discount meat bin, right? You know, like $5 off, $10 off. I did that for years. I shopped for years at thrift stores. This is not a pretty story. I shopped for my clothes at thrift stores. I did all of those things, but I knew I was doing the right thing. But it was a business coach, Alice Hyman, that said, what are you doing selling printers? I thought, I don't know. So, yeah. So business coaches.
I love that. I love
Mm-hmm.
that. Because you
Mm-hmm.
do, you've got to figure out what it is that is your purpose, what it is you're called to do. That scripture that says God gives us the desires of our heart. When I was young, I thought that meant, oh, well, if I desire a convertible, I wish for one. But no, I realize it means God plants those desires in our heart that we are supposed to have. And when we surrender to those, we live a fulfilled life. We live an enlightened life when we are flowing in those desires that God's given us.
And
And the fact that you felt called and you did
talents,
it.
even those gifts, like as I started this thing that people tried to squash in me, those were put in me as a child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? It just made you stronger. Like everything happened for you instead of to you when you look at it and say, okay, God somehow used that. You know, God somehow used your mom telling you, oh, don't ask questions, and your husband telling you, why can't you just be happy with what's right in front of you? And all these other things. Like all of those things made you the voice that you are now. And that voice is giving hope to thousands of people. And that is how you flow in your purpose. And I want to close with one more question. And that's this one. What do you think is one truth with purpose that most people are missing? Are they, is it that maybe they're too scared, like maybe they have an idea of what the purpose is, or what? Like it took you making a decision that you were going to quit your job to run after your purpose. Once you knew that was your purpose, did you feel like you even had a choice? I mean, where were you?
So I was in I thought it was a great relationship. But when I came back from that conference and he pressured me, you know, he pressured me. He said, so what did they teach you to do? And I knew he was going to pressure me. And this is terrible. And I've never said this like on on audio, video, But the next time we were at the gym together, he actually introduced me to somebody that had never met before. This is what he said. He was raised Catholic. He said, "This is my girlfriend, Kathy. She thinks she knows more than the Pope, and she thinks it's okay for two men to have anal sex." That's how he introduced me to somebody. And I thought, oh, this is going to be an uphill battle. This is going to be an uphill battle. I knew at that GCN conference, when I watched worship, I knew this was real. And I was faced with it. And I went home from there. No, I went to work the next day. And I was supposed to have dinner with him that night, stop by his house and have dinner. And when I stopped by, again, crying, I said, I can't do this. I can't do it. 5 years. So I quit my job after that, quit a relationship. Doesn't pencil out. I'm telling you, John, none of this pencils out. And I said to him, I feel like I have a choice before me. I can either choose a purpose. And I said I could either choose a person, which is you, or I could choose a purpose, which I think God is pushing me towards. And I'm going to choose the purpose. And I ended the relationship that night. None of this makes sense. But the biggest thing that should have held me back, and I don't know why it didn't. I just don't know why it didn't. I think the thing that holds people back is finances. Absolute fear of how am I going to pay for my home? How am I going to meet the mortgage? How am I going to do all these things? And I was very cognizant of them. And I was trying to figure out, like Wendy and I, when we were hiking the other day, I thought, I wonder, like, if I had really sat down and penciled this thing out, would I have made this decision? Probably would have made this decision. But how did I do that? I don't know how I did it. But
The Holy Spirit, God gave you what you needed to make the right decision.
Because it doesn't pencil out. And you've got to know, like, it doesn't pencil out with a lot of your people too. It just doesn't pencil out.
It doesn't with me. I mean, I left like a really lucrative job to start doing this a couple of years ago. But on paper, I'm like, I'm still floating, you know. I'm like, I thank God. But
I am so happy. I am so happy.
Absolutely.
I have now created the life that I love. I love where I live, still in the same house. I love the people I'm in association with. I love doing this intellectual, academic, sharing with people, encouraging people, equipping people. I am so happy with my life, but it has been a struggle to get here. But I am 70 and I love my life.
And it radiates. It radiates. Well, I better wrap this up, Kathy, but thank you so much. What stands out to me from everything we've talked about in this whole conversation about purpose is that it is not always comfortable.
No.
And sometimes choosing our purpose causes us to leave certainty. It causes us to leave our comfort zone. It causes us to challenge other people's assumptions. Sometimes purpose asks us to build bridges where other people are building walls. And Kathy, you are spending your life doing just that. And it is just beautiful to see how you flow in your purpose every day. Like I said, when I first launched the podcast, I'm like, I need to talk to Kathy Baldock. I'm like, I do not know anyone who really is just flowing in your purpose to such an 100% level as Kathy. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it.
And I want to be with you in person again. So we'll do that.
Yeah, we need to make that happen. Absolutely, for sure. Yeah. And please never stop living your purpose and never stop shining your light, Kathy.
Thank you, sweet thing.
Oh, thank you too.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.